Two identical boys haven't spoken a word since their mother's tragic death, leaving their millionaire father desperate for answers. Doctors call it selective trauma, but the neighborhood whispers it's a curse. Then one day, a cleaning lady with an electronic ankle monitor and a troubled past steps into their mansion, and one of the twins breaks his silence with a single, devastating word. "Mommy?" What hidden connection exists between this ex-convict and these silent children? Why do they remember a lullaby she's never taught them? As buried secrets begin to surface, a dangerous game unfolds within the walls of the Carter estate, one that will shatter everything you thought you knew about family, memory, and the bonds that even science cannot explain. Don't miss this heart-wrenching story that has viewers saying they couldn't stop watching until the final revelation. Follow our channel for more incredible true stories that will leave you speechless. Like and comment where you're watching from. We read every single one. It was a stifling morning in Carbondale, Illinois. The soybean field stretched as far as the eye could see, but inside the vast Carter family estate, a thick silence reigned. Not the silence of peace. An uncomfortable silence, as if the air carried a secret that no one dared touch. Jack and Samuel, identical 4-year-old twins, sons of powerful agricultural producer Henry Carter, did not speak. They didn't murmur. They didn't laugh. Since the day Henry's wife died in a tragic car accident, the boys had plunged into a silence that doctors called selective trauma, but that the neighborhood whispered was a curse. That morning, someone new arrived at the house. Evelyn Moore, 34, hair tied in a loose bun, pale face, and the expression of someone carrying more winter in her chest than the calendar allowed. She wore an electronic ankle monitor, coming from the social reintegration system after 3 years in the state prison for fraud and disturbing the public order. She was a cleaner, but her record made it clear. She was also bipolar, unstable, and unpredictable. Henry didn't want to hire her, but after a recommendation forced by the social worker who was monitoring the twins, he gave in. "You clean. You don't talk to them. Understood?" he said, with the coldness of someone cutting meat before it bleeds. At 10:24 that morning, as Evelyn swept the living room floor, the twins appeared standing in the doorway, motionless, wide-eyed, an inexplicable tension in the air. Evelyn, distracted, was humming a broken melody, almost imperceptible, something that seemed to come from memory rather than throat. That's when Jack took a step forward, touched his brother's shoulder, pointed at her, and whispered, "Mommy." The house seemed to freeze in that moment. Henry, who had been watching from the hallway, felt his heart stop. The sound of his coffee mug shattering against the hardwood floor echoed through the mansion. The twins hadn't spoken a single word in 16 months, 3 weeks and 4 days. Not since the accident that took Elizabeth Carter's life. "What did you say?" Henry's voice cracked, barely above a whisper himself. Jack didn't respond to his father. Instead, his wide blue eyes remained fixed on Evelyn, who had turned around, broom still in hand, confusion washing over her face. Samuel, the quieter of the twins, stepped forward to stand beside his brother, their matching red polo shirts and khaki shorts making them look like mirror images. Evelyn's hands trembled slightly. I'm sorry, Mr. Carter. I didn't say anything to them." Her voice had the practiced steadiness of someone who'd learned to justify herself to authority figures, prison guards, parole officers, and now her wealthy employer. "They spoke," Henry said, more to himself than to her. His face had drained of color, making the scar along his jawline stand out like a pale lightning bolt. Jack spoke. Evelyn glanced between the man and the children, clearly uncomfortable with the intensity crackling in the air. "Should I leave the room, sir?" Before Henry could answer, Samuel, the twin who had never been first at anything, raised a small, trembling finger and pointed directly at Evelyn's chest. "You sing our song," he whispered, his voice rusty from disuse. Henry moved faster than Evelyn thought possible for a man his size. He scooped both boys into his arms and backed away from her as if she were contagious. "What did you do to them?" The accusation in his voice was as sharp as a blade. "Nothing," Evelyn protested, dropping the broom. "I swear I was just cleaning and humming to myself." "The lullaby," Jack said, his voice stronger now, struggling in his father's grip. "She knows Mommy's lullaby." Henry's face contorted with something beyond anger, something closer to fear. "Get Dr. Patterson on the phone," he barked at Mrs. Brinker, the elderly housekeeper who had appeared in the doorway, drawn by the commotion. "Now." As Mrs. Brinker hurried away, Evelyn stood frozen, the broom at her feet. She wasn't sure what was happening, but she knew one thing. She had never met these children before today, and she certainly didn't know any lullaby that their mother might have sung. So why did their little voices feel like hooks pulling at something buried deep in her memory? And why couldn't she shake the feeling that she'd seen those identical blue eyes somewhere before? Henry Carter paced the length of his mahogany-paneled study, bourbon glass in hand, the amber liquid sloshing dangerously close to the rim with each turn. The grandfather clock in the corner ticked relentlessly, marking each second of the most unsettling day he'd experienced since Elizabeth's funeral. "Play it again," he commanded, eyes fixed on the security monitor mounted on the wall. The estate's head of security, a former military man named Reynolds, pressed a button on the tablet in his hands. The footage rewound with a mechanical whir, then began again. Evelyn sweeping, the twins appearing in the doorway, and then, the moment that had upended Henry's carefully constructed world, Jack's lips moving as he uttered that devastating word, "Mommy." "How?" Henry whispered, more to himself than to Reynolds. 16 months of silence, the best specialists in the country, hypnotherapy, play therapy. Nothing worked. He drained his glass in one burning swallow. Then this ex-con walks in, and suddenly they're talking. Reynolds shifted uncomfortably. "Sir, Dr. Patterson is waiting in the sitting room, and Mrs. Brinker mentioned that Ms. Moore seems quite affected by all this." Henry's laugh was sharp enough to cut. "Affected? She should be. I want her background checked again, deeper this time. Every detail since birth. Something isn't right." In the east wing of the mansion, Dr. Elijah Patterson, a child psychologist with steel-gray hair and wire-rimmed glasses, sat across from the twins. They had retreated back into silence, their identical faces impassive as they stacked wooden blocks on the plush carpet. "Jack," Dr. Patterson said gently, "can you tell me why you spoke to Ms. Moore today?" Jack's small hand stilled on a red block. He glanced at his brother, some unspoken communication passing between them, then shook his head. "Samuel, would you like to tell me about the song you mentioned?" Samuel's lower lip trembled slightly, but he kept his eyes downcast, refusing to engage. Dr. Patterson sighed and made a notation in his leather-bound notebook. He'd been working with the Carter twins since a week after their mother's fatal accident, a head-on collision on Route 13 that had killed Elizabeth instantly. The boys had been in the backseat, physically unharmed but psychologically devastated. They hadn't spoken a word since being pulled from the wreckage, until today. Meanwhile, Evelyn sat on the edge of her bed in the servants' quarters, hands clasped so tightly that her knuckles had gone white. The ankle monitor felt heavier today, its presence a constant reminder of her precarious position. One mistake, one misunderstanding, and she'd be violating parole. She hadn't asked for this job. The halfway house administrator had arranged it, calling it an opportunity for rehabilitation in a stable environment. Evelyn had almost laughed at that. There was nothing stable about a home where grief hung in the air like invisible smoke. With trembling fingers, she reached for her medication, counting out the pills that kept her mind from fracturing. One blue, one white, one peach-colored. The routine was comforting in its familiarity. A soft knock at her door startled her, pills scattering across the bedspread. "Ms. Moore?" It was Mrs. Brinker, her voice like dried leaves rustling. "Mr. Carter would like a word." Evelyn gathered her courage along with her pills, swallowing them dry before following the housekeeper through the labyrinthine hallways of the Carter estate. Henry waited in his study, standing by the window that overlooked the endless fields that had built his fortune. The sunset painted the soybeans a golden hue that matched his drink. "Tell me about the song," he said without turning. Evelyn stood awkwardly by the door. "Sir, I wasn't singing anything specific, just humming whatever came to mind." Henry turned slowly, his eyes red-rimmed from either alcohol or emotion, perhaps both. "And yet my sons, who haven't spoken since watching their mother die, called you Mommy, and mentioned a lullaby." Evelyn flinched at the accusation in his tone. "I don't know why they did that. I've never met your children before today. I've never met your wife." "My wife," Henry said, his voice dropping to something dangerous, "used to sing them a very specific lullaby. Something about sparrows and the moon. Something she made up herself." A chill ran down Evelyn's spine. The melody that had been floating through her mind as she swept, it had seemed to come from nowhere. A half-remembered tune that had simply bubbled up. I don't know that song," she said, but uncertainty colored her words. Henry studied her face with the intensity of a man looking for answers in a cipher. Whatever he saw there made him turn away. "You're dismissed. For now." That night, Evelyn dreamed of a car speeding down a dark highway, headlights cutting through rain. She woke gasping, sweat-soaked sheets tangled around her legs. The next morning, she found something disturbing. While cleaning the twins' playroom, she noticed they had rearranged their alphabet blocks overnight. They spelled a single word: remember. And in the steamed-up window of Henry's car, parked in the circular driveway, presumably drawn by a small finger, were 3 dots and a heart. Evelyn felt a tug in her chest, like a string being pulled from deep inside her. That evening, as she organized her meager belongings in the dresser of her small room, her hand brushed against something tucked between the garments. A photograph, yellowed at the edges. In it, a younger Evelyn with longer hair, holding 2 newborn babies. Her face beamed with exhaustion and joy. Babies she had no memory of ever holding. The photograph trembled in Evelyn's hands like a leaf caught in an autumn breeze. Her mind raced, trying to make sense of the image that couldn't possibly exist. She studied her younger self. The unmistakable shape of her eyes, the small birthmark near her temple that she'd always hated but never bothered to conceal. And those babies. 2 identical bundles cradled in her arms. "This isn't possible," she whispered to the empty room, her voice catching on the edges of panic. Her parole officer had warned her about stress-induced delusions, a possible side effect of her medication combined with the trauma of incarceration. But this felt different. This felt like a memory trying to surface through concrete. With hands that wouldn't stop shaking, Evelyn reached beneath her mattress and pulled out a small metal box, the only possession she'd managed to keep through her time in prison. The lock clicked open, revealing the fragments of a life interrupted. A crumpled bus ticket, a faded hospital bracelet, and a stack of letters bound with a frayed rubber band. Letters she'd written, but never sent. Letters addressed simply to "my boys." The first one, dated 5 years ago, began, "Today would be your first birthday. I wonder if you're walking yet." Evelyn's breath caught in her throat. She'd always assumed these were fantasy letters, written during the worst period of her bipolar episodes, manifestations of her desire for the family she'd never had. Her therapist had encouraged the writing as a way to process her grief over a life derailed by mental illness. But what if they weren't fantasies? Buried beneath the letters was a wrinkled receipt from St. Elizabeth Medical Center in St. Louis, dated exactly 5 years ago. The service listed obstetrical care, and at the very bottom of the box, folded into a tight square, was a document she didn't remember. With trembling fingers, she unfolded it, revealing 3 words in bold type at the top: maternal rights revoked. The room seemed to tilt around her. Evelyn pressed her palm against her lower abdomen, searching for the memory of a pregnancy, stretching skin, the kick of tiny feet. Nothing surfaced except a strange, hollow sensation, and the phantom echo of an infant's cry. Outside her window, thunder rolled across the Illinois sky, promising a storm. Evelyn barely noticed. Her mind was elsewhere, unspooling possibilities that were too terrible to fully contemplate. The next morning, dark circles shadowed Evelyn's eyes as she mechanically went about her duties. Henry was meeting with investors in Chicago, leaving the house quieter than usual. Mrs. Brinker supervised the twins' breakfast while Reynolds patrolled the grounds, his gaze occasionally lingering on Evelyn with suspicious intensity. Gathering her courage, Evelyn approached Mrs. Brinker as the older woman was arranging fresh flowers in the main hall. "Mrs. Brinker," she began hesitantly, "how long have you worked for the Carter family?" The housekeeper's hand stilled on a lily stem. "Going on 15 years now, since before Mr. Henry married Miss Elizabeth. And the twins, were you here when they were born?" Mrs. Brinker's expression shuddered like windows before a hurricane. "That's not an appropriate topic of conversation for household staff, Ms. Moore." "Please," Evelyn pressed, lowering her voice. "I found something. A photograph of me, with 2 babies that look exactly like Jack and Samuel." The color drained from Mrs. Brinker's face. The flower arrangement crashed to the marble floor, water and shattered crystal spreading like a premonition. "You need to leave this house," the housekeeper whispered, her voice urgent. "You need to forget whatever you think you know." Before Evelyn could respond, tiny footsteps padded across the hardwood floors. Jack and Samuel appeared, dressed in matching sailor outfits that made them look like dolls from another era. "Ms. Evelyn," Samuel said softly, his voice still rusty with disuse. "Will you read us a story?" Mrs. Brinker moved with surprising speed for her age, placing herself between Evelyn and the boys. "The twins need their nap now. Dr. Patterson says it's important to maintain their routine." But as she shepherded the boys toward the staircase, Jack turned back and locked eyes with Evelyn. Slowly, deliberately, he raised his small hand to his chest and tapped 3 times, directly over his heart. The exact gesture Evelyn had been making in the photograph. That afternoon, Evelyn made her decision. During her scheduled hour of free time, she walked the half-mile to the public library in town. Under the watchful eye of a librarian who clearly recognized the ankle monitor for what it was, Evelyn settled at a computer terminal. Her search history would later reveal her determination. St. Louis adoption records, surrogate mother's legal rights, Carter family agricultural empire, Elizabeth Carter car accident, bipolar medication memory loss. By the time she returned to the estate, the summer storm had broken, drenching her to the skin. But Evelyn barely noticed the discomfort. Her mind was consumed by what she had learned. Elizabeth Carter had never given birth. The Carter family had made a substantial donation to a fertility clinic in St. Louis 5 years ago. And 3 years ago, Evelyn Moore had been arrested at a protest outside that very same clinic, screaming about stolen children. The official record stated she had been experiencing a psychotic break, fueled by delusions. She had been charged with trespassing, assault, and disturbing the peace. Her existing bipolar diagnosis had been used to expedite her case through the system and into incarceration. But what if it hadn't been a delusion? As twilight descended on the Carter estate, Evelyn stood at her bedroom window, watching Henry's car pull up the long driveway. Her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. Tonight she would confront him. Tonight she would demand the truth. What she didn't realize was that Henry had spent his day in Chicago making very different arrangements. As he stepped from his luxury sedan into the gathering darkness, he spoke quietly to Reynolds, who nodded grimly. "Tonight," Henry said, his breath fogging in the rain-cooled air. "She needs to be gone by morning." In the twins' bedroom, illuminated only by a nightlight shaped like a spaceship, Jack and Samuel sat cross-legged on the floor, a crayon passing between them as they worked on a drawing. The paper showed 3 stick figures holding hands, 2 small, 1 tall. Above the tall figure, they had written a single word in their childish scrawl: truth. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed 11, its deep resonance echoing through the sleeping house like a warning. Evelyn sat on the edge of her bed, rehearsing what she would say to Henry when she confronted him. The words tangled in her mind, scenarios branching and collapsing with each passing minute. A soft knock on her door startled her so badly she nearly cried out. "Who is it?" she whispered, heart thundering against her ribs. No answer came, only another gentle tap. Evelyn rose slowly, every nerve ending alive with apprehension. She cracked the door open, peering into the dimly lit hallway. Mrs. Brinker stood there, her thin frame silhouetted by the distant security light. The housekeeper's usual impeccable appearance had crumbled. Her silver hair hung loose around her shoulders, and her hands clutched a thick manila envelope to her chest like a shield. "May I come in?" The older woman's voice trembled. Evelyn stepped back, allowing Mrs. Brinker to slip inside. The housekeeper's eyes darted nervously toward the corners of the ceiling. "The cameras," she murmured. "Reynolds checks them every morning, but they don't record sound." Evelyn felt a chill crawl up her spine. "What's going on?" Mrs. Brinker sank onto the edge of the bed, suddenly looking every one of her 70-plus years. "I should have done this years ago," she said, her voice breaking. "When I first suspected, but I was a coward. I told myself it wasn't my business, that I was imagining things." She thrust the envelope toward Evelyn with shaking hands. "Take it. Read it quickly. I'll deny I ever gave it to you if anyone asks." Evelyn opened the envelope, her fingers clumsy with tension. Inside was a thick legal document, its pages crisp and official. The heading read, "Confidential, Surrogate Agreement and Termination of Parental Rights." As she scanned the dense text, certain phrases leaped out at her. Healthy male twins, exclusive parental rights transferred upon birth, substantial compensation, maintenance of absolute confidentiality, and most chillingly, Subject agrees to medical intervention to address postpartum complications, including memory modification therapy if deemed necessary. Memory modification therapy? Evelyn whispered, horror spreading through her like ice water. They can't do that. It's not legal. Mrs. Brinker laughed bitterly. Legal doesn't matter when you have money like the Carters. Henry's grandfather practically built this county. His family name is on half the buildings in town. Evelyn flipped through the pages, her disbelief mounting. This says I voluntarily entered a high-risk experimental treatment program after delivery. Did you? Mrs. Brinker asked softly. Evelyn pressed her palm against her forehead, trying to force memories to surface. I don't remember being pregnant, I don't remember giving birth, but there are gaps. My diagnosis, the medications they said I needed. Mrs. Brinker nodded grimly. Elizabeth couldn't have children. They tried for years. Fertility treatments, specialists. Nothing worked. It nearly destroyed her. Then suddenly she's showing off 2 perfect baby boys. The housekeeper's thin lips pressed together. Only she never looked pregnant. Just went away for a few months and came back with twins. Evelyn felt dizzy, the room spinning around her as pieces clicked into place. The clinic in St. Louis, I was protesting there 3 years ago. I thought it was about unethical experiments, but I couldn't remember why I cared so much. The twins were already 2 by then, Mrs. Brinker confirmed. You must have remembered something, enough to lead you there. A sudden realization hit Evelyn. The car accident. Elizabeth. What really happened? Mrs. Brinker's face went ashen. I don't know all the details, but I overheard Elizabeth on the phone the day before. She was upset, talking about making things right and telling the truth. The next day, she was dead. The implications hung in the air between them, too terrible to voice aloud. Downstairs, a door slammed. Both women froze. Henry's in his study, Mrs. Brinker whispered. He drinks more now since Elizabeth died. But Reynolds is still up, patrolling. And he's completely loyal to Henry. She rose shakily. I should go before I'm missed. As the housekeeper moved toward the door, Evelyn caught her wrist. Why are you helping me now? Mrs. Brinker's eyes glistened with unshed tears. Because those boys haven't spoken in over a year. Because they drew your face over and over in their art therapy sessions. But Dr. Patterson kept telling Henry it was Elizabeth they were drawing. Because they deserve to know the truth, whatever it costs me. After Mrs. Brinker left, Evelyn sat motionless, the contract clutched in her trembling hands. Outside, the wind had picked up, bending the trees along the driveway into tortured shapes. A storm was coming, both literally and figuratively. Morning arrived with the pale, washed-out light that follows a night of heavy rain. Evelyn moved mechanically through her cleaning duties, her mind far away, processing the revelations of the previous night. She found herself in the twins' playroom, absently straightening toys while watching Jack and Samuel through the window as they played in the garden under Reynolds' watchful eye. She hadn't slept at all. The contract was now hidden beneath a loose floorboard in her room, along with her box of letters and the photograph. Evidence of a life stolen from her, a life she couldn't even properly mourn, because she couldn't remember it. A small notebook lay open on the twins' craft table. Curious, Evelyn picked it up. Inside, in careful block letters, were words she'd heard the boys whisper over the past days. Hurts inside, Mommy sang, scared of dark room. Her heart constricted painfully in her chest. They were trying to communicate, not just with her, but with anyone who might listen. Evelyn was so absorbed in the notebook that she didn't hear Henry enter the room until his shadow fell across the page. Finding anything interesting? His voice was controlled, but an undercurrent of rage simmered just beneath the surface. Evelyn's head snapped up. I was just cleaning, she said, hating the tremor in her voice. Henry's eyes, bloodshot from another night of drinking, narrowed dangerously. Reynolds tells me you went to the public library yesterday. Curious behavior for someone who's supposed to be focusing on rehabilitation and staying out of trouble. Evelyn's mouth went dry. It's not against my parole conditions to use a library. No, Henry agreed, stepping closer. But accessing information about my family might be considered concerning, especially given your history of mental instability and delusions. The threat in his words was unmistakable. Evelyn steeled herself, squaring her shoulders. I know what you did, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. I know those boys are mine. For a moment, Henry's mask slipped, revealing such cold calculation that Evelyn instinctively stepped back. Then his face smoothed into something almost pitying. "Ms. Moore," he said quietly, "I think it's time we discussed your continued employment here, and exactly what might happen if your parole officer receives a report about your increasingly erratic behavior." In the garden below, the twins had stopped playing. Both stood perfectly still, their identical faces turned upward toward the playroom window, watching the confrontation unfold with solemn, knowing eyes. The afternoon sun filtered through the mahogany blinds of Henry's study, casting tiger-striped shadows across his expressionless face. Evelyn sat rigid in the leather chair opposite his massive desk, her ankle monitor feeling suddenly heavier, like a ball and chain from another century. "You don't know what you're talking about," Henry said, his voice measured and cold. He poured himself another finger of bourbon, the crystal decanter clinking against the glass with surgical precision. "Your medical history suggests you're prone to confabulation, creating false memories, believing things that never happened." Evelyn's hands clenched in her lap. "Stop gaslighting me. I have proof." A flicker of genuine concern crossed Henry's face. "Proof? What exactly do you think you have?" "The contract, the photograph, the medical records from St. Louis." Each word felt like a stone placed on a scale, tipping the balance of power incrementally in her direction. Henry's facade cracked for just a moment, a twitch at the corner of his eye, a tightening of his jaw. Then he leaned back, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. "Elizabeth couldn't have children," he said finally, his voice softer, almost mournful. "We tried everything. Every treatment, every specialist, it nearly destroyed her." The admission hung in the air between them, unexpectedly vulnerable. "We bought embryos," Henry continued, staring past Evelyn at something only he could see. "A private arrangement through a clinic that catered to wealthy clients with unique requirements." Evelyn felt a chill despite the warmth of the room. "And I was what? Just an incubator? A rented womb?" Henry's gaze snapped back to her, suddenly sharp. "You were a surrogate, paid exceptionally well. You knew exactly what you were signing up for." "Then why don't I remember any of it?" Evelyn demanded, leaning forward. "Why do I have a 3-year gap in my memory that conveniently coincides with the twins' birth? Why was I arrested outside that clinic screaming about stolen babies?" Henry set down his glass with deliberate care. "Because you disappeared before completing the final paperwork. You were supposed to sign the formal relinquishment after delivery, but you checked yourself out of the hospital against medical advice and vanished with the discharge papers." He opened a drawer and withdrew a file, sliding it across the polished desktop toward her. Inside were medical reports, with her name clearly printed at the top, detailing severe postpartum psychosis, delusional behavior, and recommended treatments. "You were unstable," Henry continued, his voice taking on a rehearsed quality, as if he'd told this story many times. "A danger to yourself and others. We tried to find you, to get you the help you needed. By the time you surfaced at that protest, the boys were legally ours. A judge had terminated your parental rights due to abandonment and mental incompetence." Evelyn's mind raced, trying to find the gaps in his story. "If I was just a surrogate, why did the twins recognize me? Why did they call me Mommy?" Something dark flashed across Henry's face. They lost their mother in a traumatic accident. They're confused, projecting their grief onto the first maternal figure they've encountered since then. "You're lying," Evelyn whispered, certainty hardening in her chest like concrete. "They know me. Somehow, they remember me." Henry's knuckles whitened around his glass. "What exactly are you hoping to accomplish here, Ms. Moore? You have a criminal record, a documented mental illness, a history of violent outbursts. Even if there were some irregularities in the adoption process, no court would ever grant you custody." The threat was implicit but clear. "Pursue this, and your life will be destroyed all over again." Before Evelyn could respond, the study door burst open. Dr. Patterson stood there, his usual composed demeanor shattered, face flushed with exertion. "The twins," he gasped. "They're talking. To everyone. They're asking for their real mother." Henry was on his feet instantly. "What did you tell them?" "Nothing," Patterson insisted, eyes darting nervously to Evelyn. "But they're saying things, specific things, about a room with bright lights, about being separated from their mother when they were born. Things they couldn't possibly know." Henry's face drained of color. With a muttered curse, he pushed past the doctor and strode into the hallway. Evelyn followed, heart hammering against her ribs. They found the twins in the kitchen, perched on counter stools while Mrs. Brinker hastily wiped tears from her weathered cheeks. The boys looked up in perfect synchronicity as Henry and Evelyn entered. "Daddy lies," Samuel said clearly, his small voice steady and sure. "He took us from her." Jack nodded solemnly. "We remember the hospital. The doctors took us away and she cried." Henry froze, then slowly turned to Evelyn, his expression a battlefield of rage and fear. "What have you been telling them?" "Nothing," Evelyn said truthfully. "I've barely spoken to them." "We remember," the twins said in unison, their identical blue eyes. Her eyes, Evelyn suddenly realized, fixed on her face with unsettling intensity. Not all of it, but pieces. Mrs. Brinker stepped forward, placing protective hands on the twins' shoulders. "Children remember more than adults think," she said quietly. "Especially trauma." Henry's face contorted. For a terrible moment, Evelyn thought he might strike the elderly housekeeper. Instead, he took a deep, shuddering breath and turned to Dr. Patterson. "Get them upstairs. Sedative if necessary. I want them calm and quiet within the hour." As Patterson hesitated, visibly uncomfortable, Henry added in a voice like steel, "They're having another episode. It's for their own good." The doctor nodded reluctantly and approached the twins. "Boys, let's go upstairs and talk about what you're feeling. Would that be okay?" Neither child moved. Their small faces had hardened into twin masks of determination. "We made this for you," Jack said, holding out a folded piece of paper to Evelyn. She took it with trembling fingers. It was a crayon drawing, crude but unmistakable. A woman with brown hair holding two babies. Around them a circle of strange, masked figures in white coats, and written across the top in childish letters, "They stole us." Henry snatched the drawing from her hands, crumpling it in his fist. "That's enough, Reynolds." The security chief appeared instantly in the doorway, hand resting on the gun holstered at his hip. "Take Ms. Moore to her room and make sure she stays there," Henry ordered. "Then call her parole officer. Tell him she's had a psychotic break and has been threatening my children." As Reynolds gripped her arm, Evelyn looked desperately at the twins. "Do you remember me? Do you know who I am?" Samuel's lower lip trembled. "You sang to us before we were born. About sparrows finding their way home. The lullaby, the one she'd been humming that first day. The melody that had seemed to come from nowhere. Get her out of here. Now." Henry's voice cracked like a whip. As Reynolds dragged her toward the door, Evelyn heard Jack's small voice rise clear and determined. "We'll tell everyone the truth. We promise, Mommy. We won't forget again." The rain lashed against the windows of Evelyn's small room, mirroring the storm of emotions raging within her. Reynolds had locked her in, removing her phone and anything she might use to communicate with the outside world. The ankle monitor felt like it was tightening with every passing hour, a constant reminder of how precarious her freedom truly was. Night had fallen, turning her window into a black mirror that reflected her pale, determined face. The distant rumble of thunder punctuated her racing thoughts as she worked frantically, tying bed sheets together to form a makeshift rope. Her hands were raw from the effort, but the physical pain was nothing compared to the ache in her chest, the visceral pull toward those two small boys who somehow remembered what had been stolen from her. "I'm coming," she whispered to the darkness, as if the twins could hear her promise through the walls and corridors that separated them. The lock clicked. Evelyn froze, quickly shoving her improvised escape route under the bed. The door swung open to reveal Mrs. Brinker, her silver hair illuminated briefly by lightning flashing through the hallway window. "Quickly," the housekeeper whispered, her age-spotted hand trembling as she beckoned. "Henry's passed out in his study. Dr. Patterson left hours ago. Reynolds is making his rounds on the east side of the property." Evelyn hesitated, suspicion flaring. "Why should I trust you?" Mrs. Brinker's weathered face crumpled. "Because I've been silent too long. Because what they did to you, what Henry and that clinic did, it isn't right." Her voice broke. "And because those boys haven't had a real mother since Elizabeth died." Something unspoken hung in the air between them. Evelyn narrowed her eyes. "Did Elizabeth know? About me?" The housekeeper looked away. "She found out. Just before the accident. She was going to tell you everything, make it right somehow." A single tear traced the network of wrinkles on her cheek. She was a good woman, caught in Henry's web of lies. Evelyn grabbed the small metal box containing her evidence from beneath the floorboard and followed Mrs. Brinker into the shadowed hallway. The mansion creaked around them, wind-whipped and restless in the storm. They moved silently toward the twins' bedroom, passing Henry's study where, through the partially open door, Evelyn glimpsed him slumped over his desk, an empty decanter at his elbow. The twins' room was bathed in the soft blue glow of a rocket ship nightlight. Jack and Samuel sat wide awake on Samuel's bed, as if they'd been expecting her. Their matching pajamas, covered in dinosaur prints, made them look even younger, more vulnerable. "We knew you'd come," Jack whispered, sliding off the bed. Samuel followed, clutching a small backpack. "We packed," Samuel explained, his voice small but determined. "For all of us." Evelyn knelt before them, her heart expanding painfully in her chest. "Listen to me," she said gently, taking their tiny hands in hers. "I need you to know something important. I think I might be your birth mother, but there are complicated grown-up things we need to sort out." "We know," Jack said with the simple certainty of a child. "We remember pieces, like a puzzle with missing parts. The doctors took us away," Samuel continued. "You were crying. Then we lived with Daddy and Mommy Elizabeth," Jack added. "She was nice, she read us stories. But she knew the truth," Samuel whispered. "She was going to fix it. Then the car crashed." A chill that had nothing to do with the storm crawled up Evelyn's spine. "How could you possibly remember all that? You were just babies when—" "We just do," the twins said in unison, their blue eyes, her eyes, solemn and ancient in their young faces. Mrs. Brinker appeared in the doorway, her expression taut with fear. "Reynolds is coming back, you need to go now." Evelyn's mind raced. The original plan had been to take the boys and run, find somewhere safe to sort everything out. But looking at their small, trusting faces, doubt crashed over her. Was she doing the right thing? Or was she about to commit a crime that would separate them forever? "I can't take you," she said finally, her voice breaking. "If I do, they'll say I kidnapped you. They'll hunt us down and I'll go back to prison. We'll never see each other again." The twins' faces fell in perfect synchronicity. Then Jack reached into his pajama pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "We made this for Daddy," he said, pressing it into her hand, so he would understand. Evelyn unfolded it to find a crayon drawing. Evelyn and the twins holding hands, with a simple message, "Please let us be together." Tears blurred her vision. "This is beautiful, and so brave of you." "He's coming up the stairs," Mrs. Brinker hissed from the doorway. Evelyn made a split-second decision. She kissed each boy on the forehead, breathing in their clean little boy smell. "I have to go now, but I promise, I'll find a way back to you. Legally. The right way." "You promise?" Samuel asked, his lower lip trembling. "I promise," Evelyn said, slipping the drawing into her pocket. "And to help me remember that promise, can I leave something with you? Something special?" The boys nodded eagerly. Evelyn quickly unclasped the simple silver chain from around her neck, the one possession from before her arrest that truly mattered to her. The small pendant was shaped like a sparrow in flight. "This was my mother's," she explained, placing it in Jack's palm. "Keep it safe until I come back." With one last lingering look, she slipped out of the room. Mrs. Brinker led her swiftly down the service stairs and through the mudroom. The back door opened onto the storm-lashed gardens, rain immediately soaking through Evelyn's thin clothes. "The groundskeeper's shed has bolt cutters," Mrs. Brinker said urgently, "for the ankle monitor. After that, follow the creek bed south. It'll lead you to the highway without crossing any open fields." Evelyn grabbed the older woman's hand. "Thank you." Mrs. Brinker's eyes filled with tears. "Make this right. For all of you." As Evelyn disappeared into the darkness, the storm intensifying around her, she didn't see the twins watching from their bedroom window. She didn't see their small hands pressed against the glass, and she didn't see Jack place the folded drawing. Not in Henry's study where it was intended, but in the unconscious man's hand as he slept. By the time Evelyn reached the groundskeeper's shed, her lungs burning from the exertion, alarm bells were already sounding from the main house. Floodlights cut through the rain, sweeping across the property. Reynolds's voice carried on the wind, barking orders to the night security team. Her fingers closed around the cold metal of the bolt cutters. One decisive snap, and she could be free of the ankle monitor. Free to run, to disappear, to start building a case to reclaim her sons. But as she raised the tool, A sudden realization froze her in place. Running would only confirm everything Henry had claimed about her. Unstable, dangerous, unfit. She would be a fugitive, and any chance of legal custody would evaporate like morning dew. With a sob that tore from the depths of her soul, Evelyn dropped the bolt cutters. She sank to the shed floor, surrounded by garden tools and the smell of earth and gasoline, and waited for the inevitable. The shed door burst open. Reynolds stood there, rain dripping from his severe crew cut, gun drawn but pointed at the ground. "Ms. Moore," he said, professional even in his triumph, "Mr. Carter would like to speak with you." In the old barn, Evelyn's blood ran cold. Not the house, not where the twins or Mrs. Brinker might witness whatever was about to happen. The old barn, isolated at the edge of the property. As Reynolds escorted her through the driving rain, Evelyn wondered if she would survive the night. The old barn loomed against the storm-ravaged sky, a hulking shadow that seemed to consume the light around it. Rainwater cascaded from its weathered eaves as Reynolds marched Evelyn forward, one hand firmly gripping her elbow, the other never straying far from his holstered weapon. Each step through the mud brought her closer to a confrontation she both feared and craved, the final unraveling of the lies that had stolen years of her life. Inside, the barn was cavernous and smelled of damp hay and old machinery. Industrial lights cast harsh shadows across the space, illuminating Henry's tall figure as he stood beside a workbench. His suit was rumpled, his eyes bloodshot, but there was a dangerous lucidity in his gaze that made Evelyn's skin crawl. "I should have known you'd try to take them," he said without preamble, his voice eerily calm. Just like before. Evelyn stiffened. "Before?" Henry's laugh was hollow, devoid of humor. "You really don't remember, do you? After they were born, when the nurses brought them to you for that first feeding, you tried to leave. You'd already signed the preliminary papers, accepted the money, agreed to the terms, but something in you broke." The fragmentary images that had been haunting Evelyn's dreams suddenly coalesced. Hospital corridors, the weight of 2 infants in her arms, the desperate certainty that she needed to escape. "They said it was a hormonal storm," Henry continued, pacing now, his expensive shoes leaving muddy prints on the concrete floor. "Postpartum psychosis. They sedated you, took the twins back, but you checked yourself out against medical advice the next day. Disappeared." Reynolds positioned himself between Evelyn and the door, arms crossed, face impassive. "We had a deal," Henry said, his voice hardening. "A legal binding agreement. You were a surrogate, nothing more. The embryos weren't even biologically yours, they came from anonymous donors. You had no genetic claim to Jack and Samuel." Evelyn felt as though the ground beneath her feet had tilted. "What?" "The DNA test confirmed it after you disappeared. No genetic relationship whatsoever." Henry's smile was razor thin. "Did you think they were yours? Is that what this has all been about?" The revelation should have devastated her, should have extinguished the maternal certainty burning in her chest. Instead, Evelyn found herself thinking of the twins' faces, their voices, the way they had recognized her beyond all logical explanation. "It doesn't matter," she said finally. "Genetic or not, I carried them. I was their mother for 9 months, and they remember me." Henry's facade cracked, genuine confusion bleeding through. "That's not possible. They were newborns. And yet they know things," Evelyn pressed, finding strength in the undeniable truth of the twins' memories. "Things no one could have told them. About the hospital. About me crying when they were taken away." A flicker of uncertainty crossed Henry's face, quickly replaced by cold resolve. He nodded to Reynolds, who stepped forward and produced a set of plastic zip ties. "Your parole officer has been notified," Henry said clinically. "You'll be taken into custody for violating the terms of your release. Attempting to abduct children, trespassing, destruction of monitoring equipment." "I didn't cut the monitor," Evelyn pointed out. Her wrists held out resignedly as Reynolds secured them with the plastic restraints. They bit into her skin, too tight, deliberately uncomfortable. "Details," Henry dismissed with a wave of his hand. "The point is you'll be back where you belong. And this time, with the additional charges and your history of mental instability, you won't be getting out anytime soon." A sharp knock on the barn door interrupted him. Reynolds moved to answer it, gun drawn cautiously. To everyone's surprise, a petite woman in a rain-spattered pantsuit stood in the doorway, flanked by 2 uniformed police officers. Her dark hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and she wore the unmistakable expression of bureaucratic authority. Mr. Carter, I'm Linda Watkins from Child Protective Services. We need to speak with you immediately regarding your sons. Henry's face drained of color. What is this about? Ms. Watkins stepped inside, shaking raindrops from her umbrella. We received a concerning call from your housekeeper, Mrs. Brinker. She's made some rather serious allegations about the adoption of your children and potential psychological manipulation. The CPS worker's eyes fell on Evelyn, noting her zip-tied wrists and soaked clothing. Her eyebrows rose fractionally. And you must be Ms. Moore. She's trespassing, Henry interjected quickly. She attempted to abduct my children. Her parole officer has been notified. Ms. Watkins nodded, her expression neutral. I see. Officer Jenkins will need to take her statement. She gestured to one of the police officers who moved toward Evelyn. In the meantime, Mr. Carter, we need to conduct a welfare check on the twins immediately. This is ridiculous, Henry blustered, but Evelyn could see the calculation behind his eyes, weighing his options, the potential scandals, the damage to his reputation. The boys are asleep, he tried, a note of desperation creeping into his voice. Surely this can wait until morning. I'm afraid not, Ms. Watkins replied firmly. Given the nature of the allegations, we're required to verify their well-being without delay. As Henry was escorted back toward the main house by Ms. Watkins and one officer, the remaining policeman, Officer Jenkins according to his nameplate, approached Evelyn with a pocket knife. He cut through the zip ties, his expression carefully professional. We'll need your statement, ma'am, and I should inform you that your parole officer is on his way. Evelyn rubbed her chafed wrists, mind racing. The boys, she said urgently. I need to make sure they're okay. Officer Jenkins hesitated, clearly torn between protocol and the genuine distress in her voice. Let's head back to the house. You can give your statement there. The storm was beginning to subside as they made their way across the muddy expanse between the barn and the mansion. The first pale fingers of dawn were just visible on the eastern horizon, turning the retreating storm clouds a bruised purple gray. Inside, chaos reigned. The twins had apparently barricaded themselves in their room, refusing to open the door for anyone. Henry was shouting, his carefully cultivated veneer of control completely shattered. This is your fault, he spat when he saw Evelyn. You've poisoned them against me. Ms. Watkins stepped between them, her small stature belied by her commanding presence. Mr. Carter, please lower your voice. You're only making the situation worse. Through it all, Evelyn noticed Mrs. Brinker standing in the background, her weathered face set in lines of grim determination. The old woman caught her eye and gave an almost imperceptible nod. A small, calm voice cut through the commotion. We'll only come out if Evelyn is there. It was Jack, speaking through the door with a clarity that belied his 4 years. Ms. Watkins glanced between Henry and Evelyn, weighing options. Ms. Moore, would you be willing to help us speak with the children? Under supervision, of course. Before Evelyn could answer, Henry exploded. Absolutely not. She's manipulating them. She's mentally unstable. She's a convicted criminal. His outburst was so violent, so disproportionate, that everyone in the hallway fell silent, staring at him with varying degrees of shock and suspicion. Even Reynolds looked uncomfortable. In that tense silence, a small device in Ms. Watkins' pocket beeped. She checked it, her eyebrows rising in obvious surprise. Mr. Carter, I've just received notification that Judge Morales has issued an emergency order for the temporary removal of the twins pending investigation. Her voice was professionally neutral, but her eyes were watchful, cataloging Henry's reaction. This is highly unusual at this hour. The judge must have found the preliminary evidence quite compelling. Henry looked as though he'd been struck. This is absurd. You can't take my sons based on the word of a housekeeper and an ex-con. The order cites substantial documentary evidence of adoption fraud and potential identity suppression, Ms. Watkins read from her device. Submitted electronically by Mrs. Eleanor Brinker 20 minutes ago. All eyes turned to the elderly housekeeper, who stood straighter, years of subservience falling away like a discarded coat. I made copies, she said simply, of everything. Elizabeth showed me the real files before she died. She wanted someone to know in case anything happened to her. As Henry lunged toward Mrs. Brinker, Officer Jenkins smoothly intercepted him, a hand on his chest. Sir, I'm going to need you to calm down. Evelyn hardly registered the continuing confrontation. Her focus had narrowed to the bedroom door, which had cracked open just enough for 2 identical pairs of blue eyes to peer out. You came back, Samuel whispered, his voice filled with wonder. I promised I would, Evelyn replied, her heart in her throat. And then, as dawn broke over the Carter estate, Evelyn did the only thing that felt right in that moment of chaos and revelation. She began to sing, soft and low, the lullaby that had risen from the depths of her fractured memory, the song about sparrows finding their way home. One by one, the voices in the hallway fell silent, all attention drawn to the simple melody and the powerful connection it revealed. And through the partially open door, clear as bells on a winter morning, the twins' voices joined hers, in perfect harmony. Autumn painted the suburban neighborhood in shades of gold and crimson, a far cry from the vast soybean fields that had surrounded the Carter estate. 6 months had passed since that stormy night. 6 months of depositions, hearings, psychological evaluations, and waiting. Always waiting. Evelyn sat on the porch swing of the modest foster home where Jack and Samuel now lived, watching as they chased fallen leaves across the lawn. Their laughter carried on the crisp October air, a sound she never tired of hearing. Twice weekly supervised visits were all the court allowed for now, but it was infinitely more than she'd had before. They're doing so much better, said Diane Foster, the twins' foster mother, settling beside Evelyn with 2 steaming mugs of apple cider. A kindergarten teacher by profession, Diane had opened her home to the boys while the tangled legal mess sorted itself out. The nightmares are less frequent, and they're talking to everyone now, not just each other. Evelyn accepted the mug with a grateful smile, her eyes never leaving the twins. Thank you for everything you've done for them, for being patient with all of this. Diane's kind eyes crinkled at the corners. They're special boys. Anyone can see that. She paused, weighing her words. The court psychologist called yesterday. She says their attachment to you is remarkably strong for children who supposedly spent only a few days with their biological surrogate. A familiar ache bloomed in Evelyn's chest. The DNA tests had confirmed what Henry claimed. She had no genetic connection to the twins, and yet the bond between them was undeniable, inexplicable by conventional science. The prenatal bonding theory, Evelyn murmured. The idea that they could remember my voice, my heartbeat from when I carried them. It's more than that, Diane said softly. The way they look at you, it's like they're seeing someone they've known their whole lives. The legal proceedings had revealed a tangled web of deception. Henry's agricultural empire had begun to crumble months before the confrontation at the barn. His finances stretched thin by bad investments and a drought that devastated his crops. The court had frozen his remaining assets pending the outcome of multiple fraud investigations. The fertility clinic in St. Louis had been shuttered, its directors facing criminal charges for experimental memory modification procedures conducted without proper consent. Former patients were coming forward with stories of missing time, unexplained psychological symptoms, and fragmented memories. Elizabeth Carter's death had been reopened as a potential homicide investigation rather than an accident. The timing, just after she discovered the truth about the twins' origins, raised too many questions to ignore. As for Henry, he was fighting the charges with the desperate ferocity of a cornered animal, leveraging his remaining connections and hiring the best defense lawyers money could buy. And through it all, Evelyn had focused on one thing only: proving herself worthy of custody. She attended every therapy session, every parole check-in, every court-mandated parenting class with unwavering dedication. Her ankle monitor had been removed. Her parole restrictions eased as the full scope of Henry's manipulation came to light. Ms. Moore? A hesitant voice interrupted her thoughts. Evelyn looked up to find Mrs. Brinker standing at the edge of the driveway, looking smaller somehow without the Carter mansion looming behind her. The elderly woman clutched a large manila envelope to her chest. Mrs. Brinker, Evelyn said, surprised. I didn't know you were coming today. I wasn't sure I should, the housekeeper admitted, approaching slowly. But there's something you need to see. Something I found when they were clearing out the estate for the asset seizure. The twins had noticed the visitor. They abandoned their leaf pile and raced over, affection evident in their identical smiles. Mrs. Brinker, Jack exclaimed. Did you bring cookies? The old woman's weathered face softened. Not today, dear heart, but I've brought something important for your mother. The word mother hung in the air, unofficial but right. After the boys returned to their play, supervised by Diane, Mrs. Brinker handed Evelyn the envelope with trembling hands. In the old storage room, she explained, hidden inside a box of Elizabeth's things. I think she meant for you to find it someday. Inside was a small worn cardboard box containing baby clothes, 2 identical hand-knitted booties, yellowed with age, a tiny hat with embroidered sparrows, and most shockingly, a hospital bracelet bearing the name Baby Moore A. A second bracelet read, Baby Moore B. I don't understand, Evelyn whispered, her vision blurring with tears. Beneath the baby clothes lay a handwritten letter on expensive stationery, Elizabeth Carter's elegant script flowing across the page. To Evelyn, if you're reading this, I'm likely gone. What Henry did to you was unforgivable. The clinic told us you were just a surrogate, that the embryos came from anonymous donors. I believed them. Then I found the original paperwork. Your eggs, Evelyn. Your genetic material. They lied to all of us. The memory treatment they gave you after birth was experimental, dangerous. You never agreed to it. When I discovered the truth, I tried to find you. By then, you were already in prison. Your memories altered. Your identity buried. I couldn't live with this secret anymore. I was going to tell the truth no matter the cost. For you, for the boys. They deserve to know their real mother. I'm so sorry. Please forgive me for my part in this. Elizabeth. Evelyn's hands shook so violently that the letter fluttered to the ground. Mrs. Brinker picked it up gently, her eyes full of understanding. She left a sample, the housekeeper said quietly. A lock of your hair from before. She kept it all this time, hoping to prove the truth someday. A DNA test, Evelyn whispered. A real one, not controlled by Henry. Mrs. Brinker nodded. I've already spoken to your lawyer. They're expediting it. 2 weeks later, on a crisp November morning, a small cardboard box was delivered to Diane Foster's front porch. There was no return address, just a simple label reading, for Jack and Samuel Moore. Inside was an old cassette tape, the kind no one used anymore. Diane, puzzled, brought it to Evelyn during her regular visit. Together with the twins, they hunted through the garage until they found an ancient boom box that could still play tapes. What is it? Samuel asked, his small fingers tracing the unmarked cassette. I don't know, sweetie, Evelyn admitted. Let's find out. She pressed play, holding her breath. Static crackled. Then a voice emerged, her own voice, younger, unbroken by years of medication and institutional food, but unmistakably hers. Hello, my little sparrows, the recording began. If you're listening to this, something has separated us. But I want you to know that no matter what happens, no matter what anyone tells you, you are mine, and I am yours. Always. The voice on the tape began to sing, the lullaby about sparrows finding their way home. Jack and Samuel sat perfectly still, their blue eyes wide with wonder as they listened to the mother they had somehow always remembered, despite everything science said was possible. When the song ended, the voice continued, Even when I'm not with you, my love is. Be brave, be kind, be free, and never let anyone silence who you truly are. The tape clicked to an end. In the profound silence that followed, Evelyn felt small hands slip into hers, one on each side, perfect mirrors of each other. We knew, Jack said simply. We always knew you were our real mommy, even when we couldn't say it, Samuel added. The DNA results arrived 3 days later, confirming what Elizabeth's letter had claimed. Evelyn was their biological mother. The clinic had harvested her eggs without consent, created the embryos, then deliberately suppressed her memories after birth. The judge's final ruling came down just before Christmas. Full custody granted to Evelyn Moore, with all charges against her dismissed and her record expunged. Henry Carter, facing multiple federal indictments, had fled the country, his remaining assets frozen, his empire in ruins. On moving day, as Evelyn helped the twins pack their belongings from the foster home, Samuel found the sparrow necklace she had left with them that stormy night so many months ago. We kept it safe, he said, placing it in her palm. Just like you asked. Evelyn knelt before them, closing their small hands around the pendant. Keep it, she said, her voice steady despite the tears threatening to spill. To remind us that no matter what happens, no matter how lost we might feel, we'll always find our way back to each other. Like the sparrows in the song, Jack whispered. Exactly like that, Evelyn agreed, gathering them into her arms. These miracle boys who had remembered her when science said they couldn't, who had recognized her soul when her face was unfamiliar, who had called to her across the voids of memory and time. And as snow began to fall outside the window of the home that would now be theirs, Evelyn whispered the truth that no court document, no DNA test, no scientific explanation could fully capture. Some bonds can never be broken. Not by distance or time, not by lies or deception, not even by forgetting. Some bonds transcend explanation. When Evelyn's memories were stolen and her children taken, it was the twins' unwavering connection to her that ultimately revealed the truth. In a world where wealth and power can rewrite reality, it was the purest form of love, a mother's bond with her children, that proved impossible to erase. What would you have done in Evelyn's place? Would you have found the courage to trust your instincts when everyone called you delusional? This story reminds us that the most powerful memories aren't stored in our minds, but in our souls. The twins remembered Evelyn not with their thoughts, but with their hearts. And in the darkest moments when justice seemed impossible, it was that unbreakable connection that guided them home to each other. Like sparrows finding their way through the storm, perhaps there are bonds in your own life that deserve to be honored, memories that should be cherished, or truths that need to be spoken. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Follow our channel for more extraordinary tales of triumph over adversity, and leave a comment telling us what resonated most with you. Remember, sometimes the most profound love stories aren't between romantic partners, but between a parent and child, a love so powerful that not even science can fully explain its resilience.